Hello, as many of you know, I've shared my own spiritual journey, and part of that journey is that I've said I was part of a Gnostic group for several years. Now, I understand that every time I say that, people are asking me, what is Gnosticism? And every time it's asked, I'm left in a somewhat awkward position because there's no simple answer really. And so, even though in this video I won't be able to give you the complete reality, I can certainly give you a sense of what it's all about and give you the pure meaning of what Gnosis is. If you're looking for a clear definition of what Gnosticism is, or what Gnosis is, and you want to categorize it and relate it to certain books, periods of time in history, link it to certain groups of people, religions, or beliefs, then you're looking in the wrong direction if you want to understand the meaning of Gnosis in a pure way. If you want to understand the spirit of Gnosis and how you can invoke your own inner Gnosis in your own life. You see, if you believe Gnosticism is a religion with a certain set of beliefs, you may say, I know what Gnosticism is, but you don't. You're just like someone peering into a shop window, looking at some candy and saying, I know that candy. But you don't, because you haven't tasted it. Moreover, Gnosticism is quite the opposite of what we conventionally understand as religion, and most Gnostics throughout antiquity rebelled against the most organized religion, not because they didn't believe in them or because they were just tyrants, but because they understood the teachings of religions in completely different ways. And they understood religion in a different way because they had this sort of gnosis consciousness, you could call it. And it's this wisdom and purity of gnosis consciousness that I want to talk about, because that's what really matters when we're talking about Gnosticism. So I am going to avoid arguing about the validity and links to such texts as the Nag Hammadi, Pistis Sophia, Hermetica, Kybalion, Book of Enoch, Tablets of Thoth, are all sublime, deeply Gnostic and beautiful texts, by the way. I recommend to study them all. Perhaps on future videos, if you're interested, I will cover such books. Feel free to let me know what you're interested in. But the point is, Gnostics are those who attain a high level or a high degree of gnosis, and therefore they can recognize it within themselves and others and in texts, no matter what the time in history or whatever text we're talking about. Because they attained gnosis, they can understand the direct truth of any spiritual teaching or any religious teaching. The history of Gnosticism is completely mysterious, ethereal, and it's difficult to find solid sources on them because they were also secretive, and there were many different sects and groups, and it wasn't their choice to be completely secretive. They swore to secrecy because they saw and understood the state of the world, and if they were to speak of what they knew, or worse, interpreted teachings of Jesus, for example, much differently to Christianity, then they would have simply been killed, and many of them were. They were often labeled as heretics because of this. You know, for example, a lot of modern Christian groups today say that, astral projection is some kind of evil sin, but ask a Gnostic and they will show you the Bible and tell you how it tells the reality of the astral. And so part of being a Gnostic is about studying things objectively and considering all perspectives instead of only worshipping your own opinions, your own personal preferences, your own interpretations of what is convenient to you and your group and the people around you. And so since there is a lot of limited material for Gnostics, much of their sects and groups and the knowledge within them were passed on by word of mouth. And if you're wondering what kind of people we could call Gnostics, there are many. And, it's something that is attained from within. It's not limited to a certain type of people. You don't need to say, I believe in Gnosticism, or I am a Gnostic. There are many in society that many modern Gnostics would easily call Gnostic. And so we can learn how to recognize some Gnostics by understanding those who have contributed a great type of understanding through their diligent works, which are free from their own ego but strive toward a sincere heart to discover universal truth. Such people could be people like Gurdjieff, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Nagarjuna, Leonardo da Vinci, Paracelsus, Plato, Ouspensky, Swami Sivananda, Lao Tzu, Hermes Trismegistus, the Dalai Lamas, and many others. Such people were concerned deeply and immersed in Gnosis so much that they became famous, touched the hearts of many, because they imparted information of universal light that they found internally, and that people around them could not touch. They could not find this within themselves. They couldn't find that information easily through external means. And all the while, these Gnostics remained in complete humility, generosity, tolerance, and kindness for all people, for the love of humanity and universal wisdom. They were not concerned with the image of themselves, but only of the teachings they had to share, which they learned from within. Hence, as we'll see here, these positive and virtuous characteristics are crucial to have in order to know the truth yourself. And that's one reason I strive to limit my own personal life, to not show my face, not to express too much of my own personality and make it all about me and myself, right? Because the core of these teachings, the core of awakening, to find our inner gnosis, is to know ourselves, not to know someone else or be fascinated with the personality of someone else. There's no use in such things. It's a waste of time. Know yourself and you will recognize whether you hear the truth from others or not. To know someone's face, background, ethnicity, religion, age, personal history is not a way to judge the authority one has at all. The authority is based on one's level of consciousness that can only be recognized when we reach those levels within too. So, the reason why we cannot truly define Gnosis conceptually is found in the very meaning of it. Gnosis, which is actually a Greek word, means knowledge. But even then, Gnosis does not mean knowledge. It would be more accurate to call it knowing. For what we mean by knowledge when we say Gnosis is absolutely not the same as what we conventionally understand as the word knowledge. Conventional understanding of the word knowledge would be more accurately described as memory. In other words, concepts, ideas, theories, beliefs. On the other hand, Gnosis means to be conscious, cognizant, present of the direct reality of things deeper than the level of conceptualizations. It's a totally different type of knowledge, a more direct knowledge, whereas conventional knowledge is only knowledge on an intellectual level. Gnosis means that experience is better than belief. Direct experience is absolutely superior to belief. To experience the reality of something implies that mere belief in that reality is no longer necessary because you experienced it, you know it, hence knowledge. Gnosis is when our intellectual, instinctive, emotional minds are all in vibrant harmony with our direct experience. To think you know something is different from actually knowing it. One can think they know astral projection, and another can actually know it. So this is about knowledge we gain through our own experience rather than things we're told, read, believe in, and any other type of external psychological conditioning. And thus, we could also describe Gnosis as wisdom. A person can read every book there is to read and not have a hint of wisdom, right? Actually, if one isn't careful, they may even become less wise the more they read. And so in order to get to wisdom, we synthesize the 4 pillars of knowledge, which are science, art, religion, and philosophy. Together, through experience, these 4 pillars, these 4 approaches, produce wisdom and a greater understanding of every aspect of life in the 4 different dimensions that they can be comprehended and experienced in, which are science, art, religion, and philosophy. To remove or separate any of those dimensions of understanding is to not have a complete picture of reality. Hence why Einstein said, and who you could very much call a Gnostic in his approach too, and in his personal life, he said, "Science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind." Now, of course, we're not just talking about relying on modern science to make discoveries. No, we're talking about real science within ourselves. And so a Gnostic does not compartmentalize themselves into any one faith, religion, or science, but actively embraces them all to find a synthesis of understanding. Accordingly, a Gnostic is able to humbly kneel at the church or temple of almost any religion in order to seek understanding. And in the deeper reality, all religions came from Gnosis. Gnosis is religion. It is that aspect within us that is the beginning of authentic religion. When I say religion, your mind may bring images of church, temples, Christianity, but no, that is not explicitly religion. The meaning of religion comes from the Latin word religare, which means to bind, to connect the soul with consciousness, with God. Similarly, yoga means union with the divine. Therefore, in order for religion to manifest in the physical, there must have first been active gnosis for any kind of religion to have been perceived in the first place. Religion is just an interpretation of gnosis, one interpretation. All religions in their root came from gnosis. Gnosis is that spiritual root reality. Gnosis is the foundation to every religion or spiritual teaching and therefore recognizes the truth, affinities, and relationships within them all. From Osiris, Krishna, Jesus, and Zeus being symbols of the universal Christ, to Isis, Devi, Mary, and Hera as symbols of the Divine Mother. Religious texts and symbolisms speak of the universal story of spiritual truth and awakening, hidden through the language of mystery and symbolism. And if you are guided properly to understand these things, then it would suddenly become very enlightening, rather than the unspecific ambiguities of most organized religions today. And without gnosis, religion becomes very difficult to understand because we first must study the most direct and accessible thing there is, ourselves. And through studying ourselves, then we can better understand the metaphors and archetypes of many teachings. As it says at the doorway of the Temple of Delphi, Home nosce te ipsum, man, know thyself, and you shall know the universe and the gods. And so Gnosis is not limited to just the experience of spirituality and the divine either. It is about the study of all aspects of life. No matter what topic, you can apply Gnosis to it and understand it in a deeper dimension of consciousness. To a Gnostic, even the most mundane things have their meanings and purpose. But the main thing to which we apply Gnosis to in order to empower our Gnosis is ourselves, because this is where it derives from. And in understanding ourselves through direct experience, we are also understanding nature, for we are a microcosmic reflection of the laws, science, and art of everything that is around us, everything that is outside of us. When I say nature, I don't mean bushes, trees, and ants, right? I mean nature with a capital N, the divine and sublime intelligence that exists as this planet, as our human psychology, as the entire entity of our cosmos and its galaxies, as consciousness. This is how Gnosis becomes a direct study of science and not just belief. To study oneself profoundly, scientifically, psychologically, is to also study nature. And in the spirit and pursuit of science, a Gnostic seeks to experiment, experience, and to see reality objectively. The hidden purpose of all religion is to impart a psychological science. The word psychology derives from the Greek word psyche, which means soul. Thus, every negative state of mind, commonly or somewhat wrongly called sin, every type of this habit, behavior, unconsciousness, or ego is liberated through religion, is transmuted, is transcended and rebirthed into light, into consciousness. Or in other words, sin transforms into virtue, and it's through this virtue that we begin to experience Gnosis more profoundly. But remember that Gnosis is not a compass of right or wrong. It is not a rule set, a habit or behavior, but a way to see reality and verify it for yourself. For example, if you look at your hands now, you can see and verify that you have hands and a physical body. That is Gnosis. You know this. In order to verify you have a physical body, you did not need to exercise your intellect, you exercised awareness. Yet, this is only a small taste of Gnosis. This is just exercising awareness in a very shallow, superficial way. So, do you really know what your physical body is? There are many names, categorizations, theories about the enigma and mystery of the physical body and how it works, how it evolved, how it works with consciousness. But do you really know it? To really know it would be a far more profound level of Gnosis. If you knew what it was really capable of what it really implies in this existence that we call the universe. Names and ideas fail to express the ultimate truth and experience of things, of our physical body and everything. Words cannot express the truth of reality, and we should not get lost in them. And then what about if we experiment with our awareness in certain ways in order to experience that which is beyond the five senses? And how do we know that what we are seeing is of the truth or not? And so Gnosis becomes a way to verify within ourselves through psychological science these things. And, for example, to say you see, hear, touch, or taste something is one thing, but to control it is something else. As said before, Gnosis is about science and experimentation. Therefore, those things to which you can see, can you also control it? You may say, yes, I can control my physical body. Sure, you can move it in certain ways and use it to do things you desire, but can you control it if someone insults you? Or if you need to go to the bathroom, or if you're extremely hungry? What if you catch a cold and you become moody and irritable? Similarly, can you control your thoughts or maintain awareness on a specific thing without other thoughts coming in? We like to assume that we are in control of our own lives, but this is far from the truth and very difficult to understand if one is shrouded in the assumptions, in the delusions, in the belief that we are in control. This belief is synonymous with the ignorance of our own nature. And this very ignorance of our nature is what stops us from seeing the total truth about things. As to be ignorant of what is within is also to be ignorant of what is without. To say you know something is to put a full stop on it, right? Period. Done. But this should not be the way. We should only know a certain level, a certain degree of something, and keep an open mind and continue our experimentation and our experiential knowledge of life. The purpose of Gnosis and any spiritual tradition or religion is to gain back that control over ourselves. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here studying all of this, would we? We wouldn't be here if we had perfect control over ourselves. Meditation, prayer, study, and other spiritual practices would not be required at all. And what's one reason we don't know ourselves deeply? It's because of the nature of our deluded minds, or what you could call the ego. The ego loves to categorize, to label, to dig its claws into ideas, mere ideas of reality, and identify with ones it likes for its own intellectual satisfaction, perhaps to argue with others or just to be proud of some beliefs. However, this is where every scientist, religious person, philosopher, artist all go wrong if they only choose what their ego likes. If one identifies with one side of a coin, with one set of beliefs, with just one set of personal preferences, then they will feel in conflict and argue against others who have opposing beliefs and not be able to see the total reality of everyone, of anyone's beliefs, no matter how dark or how light one may be, how positive or negative one may be. You wouldn't be a Gnostic then, because a Gnostic aims to help humanity, help everyone. But if you're only going to be in your own little corner with your own egoic preferences, you are not finding universal truth. And this is what Gnostics mean by having the virtue, having the sacrifice for humanity. And this is how it benefits us in return too, by opening our mind to every perspective of anyone on the planet. Doesn't matter what they believe in, what experience they have, no matter how bad or good we may think of them, or what society thinks of them. So one aim of a Gnostic is not to get caught in this dualistic trap, but to embrace universal polarities, to understand each end of a pole, and to seek to understand the hidden relationships and implications between contradictions. It's to understand both the darkness and the light in order to gain a higher degree of gnosis. If you don't understand something, if you think something is confusing you or creates a reaction within you, an egoic reaction, then there is light to be found in that darkness. And so in order to understand this light and dark, we also have to understand those forces of light and dark within ourselves too. Reality is multidimensional. Multidimensionality implies paradox. And to comprehend these paradoxes is to awaken different dimensions of consciousness, different dimensions of understanding within ourselves. We are not just one sphere, we are many spheres, infinite spheres of understanding. To be in opposition, to be in an argument with someone means that you are limited in your own spheres of understanding. But of course, as I said, we have the ego. And it's very hard for the ego to humble itself, to be sincere, to put itself in other people's shoes and truly empathize, because we like to talk badly of other people and we lack this kindness which is at the core of every teaching of religion and spirituality. To be kind is not just to be a good person. No, to be kind opens your heart to the greater reality, to find your inner gnosis. It is a science. Kindness is a science, and that is not taught in almost any spiritual teaching or religion that you commonly see today. So, we don't need to think about Gnosis or Gnosticism in a way that we judge it and say, oh, maybe I should identify with this or not. Perhaps I like this or not. No, Gnosis is an inner reality, an aspect of life, the connection to the divine spark we all have within. Thus, Gnosis teaches us that we shouldn't just assign ourselves to one teaching, resource, or religion just because we like this or that, or just because it satisfies our ego, but instead we should take an objective and fair approach to all things, to consider all things. In its practical heights, the purpose of Gnosis is to radically transform what Christians call the soul, or what Buddhists call the mind. And to do this, Gnosis is a method to attain discipline, uprightness, and true inner tranquility beyond what you could ever think tranquility is. And through all of this comes the gradual awakening of consciousness. Through all of this comes the gradual liberation of different egoic psychological parts of our ego that is trapping our consciousness in the darkness. We do not attain this by relying on anyone, any group, any religion. We may use some groups, some religions, but we do not rely on them. Everything is up to us, nobody else. We become a responsible human being instead of blaming our problems on external things or other people. So to take this path, Gnosis teaches us that we first have to recognize our mistakes. That is, how we mistakenly see the world. But this is hard to admit for most people, right? So we also need to go through the pain of confession to ourselves through the virtue of honesty. We have to become deeply honest people. That doesn't mean we just tell the truth to people, but we have to see and be honest within ourselves, with ourselves, from moment to moment. We have to avoid the sin of lying to ourselves, of lying about reality to ourselves. Remember that sin is not meant to be a bad thing. Sin translates as to miss or to make an error. When we lie to ourselves, we convince ourselves of a deluded reality, a flawed perception that we're so egoically firm about, especially if someone argues with us. Thus, only when we see that we are living in our own matrix will we then choose to go beyond it. But this takes a firm decision from the individual, and many are eager to awaken fast, but it's a mistake to also think that we can change overnight. You might have some very quick and profound bursts of spiritual awakening, but everything takes time, maturity, a gradual opening of our energetic being. If you look in nature, everything takes time, patience. We have to tend to our inner self, plant seeds, water ourselves, make sure we receive sunlight. So to transform the mind takes conscious and upright effort and infinite patience. So you see the power of Gnosis now, and how through understanding this deeper, more authentic aspect and approach of spirituality, we can embrace all teachings from all religions. And if you do, and you understand how to interpret them and take teachings from Christianity, Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and incorporate them into your daily life, you will make huge leaps in your progression. You may notice if you go to a Christian mass, there are some wonderful things said in the Bible, but nobody is taught how to meditate. So then you go to a Buddhist temple, you will find clearer teachings on the mind, and if you go to a Hindu temple, you will find more mystical teachings, etc. As said by Samael Aun Weor, all religions are like precious pearls strung on the golden thread of divinity. And remember that intellectual, conceptual understanding of these religions is one thing, but the experiential and practical applications of such teachings from moment to moment in life distills this knowledge into experiential knowledge, gnosis. One type of knowledge is of the head, the other is of the heart. Hence, gnosis is an emotional wisdom. We feel it rather than think it. All the divine teachings are essentially a map of consciousness, but yes, this can be seen as a lot to take in, a lot to learn, but even more difficult is continuous moment-to-moment practice. And so, to give an example of how we may apply this experiential emotional gnosis, we have to get in touch with our own emotional wisdom and combine it with objective intellectual analysis. For instance, you'll notice if you pay attention in your actions, you may notice certain behaviors you do in your life are wrong if you are honest with yourself. Not because you believe it's morally wrong, but you feel that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. So how do you know if it's really wrong and not just based off what you think? It's based off what you feel. And this is intuition. Although a very shallow form of intuition, but it is intuition nonetheless. And thus, when we feel this, do we continue in ignorance and separate ourselves further from consciousness? Or do we learn to listen to our intuition and strengthen this connection to intuitive knowledge by understanding what is right by actively listening to our own conscience, to our own feelings? When we strengthen such a connection, we can apply it to many things, but it takes a lot of practice because right now we're in a state of madness, a state of impurities. So this emotional, intuitive intelligence is something that can be a little difficult to understand at first, because just like how our minds are tainted with the impurities of delusions and beliefs, so too are our emotional centers. Our emotional brain, you could say, is tainted with moods, anger, depression, frustrations, fears, anxieties. Hence, the immediate need and importance to overcome suffering. When we overcome suffering, we develop superior emotion. In other words, intuitive, intelligent emotion. It is clear, it is untainted by our suffering, by our ego. And in many ways, it is far more efficient than the intellectual mind. But this takes a lot of practice. And so we have to escape our own suffering. Not escapism, but simply escape out of the prison of our minds. The prison that we have created for ourselves. Not just created, but, we are the prison. We are the cause of our own prison. And so if we want to experience reality, we must leave our delusions of reality behind, because our delusions cause suffering and prevent us from seeing the truth. Therefore, we must study the facts of ourselves and take actions to chisel away and perfect our Masonic stone. In other words, the teaching of Freemasonry is to create a perfectly cubic stone. For when we begin on this path, we are a gross, undefined, messy stone. We need to chisel and hammer to constantly perfect ourselves. And eventually we rise in degrees of awareness. We start to attain real inner purity, inner tranquility, and we also attain mental and emotional equilibrium, equanimity. Thus we become less concerned about what to think and act like, but how to think and act. The human vehicle, including the soul, is a cosmic instrument for deep, intuitive knowledge, and we attain such an ability through cleansing our thoughts, our minds, our emotions, and our deeds, and this has to be done in a very conscious and deliberate way. A fundamental message from Gnosticism is that we can, in fact, do something about our darkness. And in many of us, we know in our conscience, deep down inside, we know, we can sense that we can do something about it. There's always steps, there's always something that our conscience is telling us what the right thing is to do. And if you have the courage to follow that, then the path starts to become gradually clear. And so Gnosis is about actually doing something about our darkness, practically, about this situation in which we are suffering, And Gnosis teaches us that God is not just some strange, far-off ruler who's judging us, but that God is an extremely divine and complex intelligence within us all. Real religion is not about making yourself feel shameful, following some pastor, or to only have faith and no experience. Real religion is the realization of the divinity within each and every person and living being. Gnostics are sort of religious rebels who go against the contemporaries of conventional wisdom. Their illuminative, creative outbursts come from their everyday experience of the divine. How else was the light carried through the ages? Through organized religion, through superficial spiritual movements, through government? No, the light was always held by the Gnostics, by Gnosis. They knew that all the heavens, all the gods, all the divine wisdom is within us. So, are you a Gnostic? I'm sure you are if you stayed with me throughout all of this. Thank you to these Gnostics, Kenneth, Sheehan, Evie, and Jason for becoming Patreons and supporting the work that I do. If you'd like to support as well, just see the Patreon link down below. And if you know anything about Gnosticism too, feel free to share below. Of course, there are infinite things that I have not been able to cover in this episode, and there are many interpretations and different sects and periods in history that can all be appreciated. And if you'd like me to cover any aspects of those, just let me know and I'll add it to the episode list. Okay, so this is Gene, and I'll see you on the next episode.